Hello everyone! Today in this tutorial we're going to go over how I made Boushh's helmet and chest armor. So to start off with the chest armor, I had to make a pattern, and for this the easiest way for me was to just use paper and cut it and keep taping it over a mannequin until I got the shape that I needed. So once I was happy with the pattern, I decided to use Sintra board for the foundation of the chest armor. And here in this clip, I am actually cutting out a practice piece, which I highly recommend you do. But it is only half of the chest armor. When I made the final version, I cut out the full piece and not just half. But Sintra is a very heavy-duty thermoplastic. It still molds with heat, but not nearly as much as Worbla or Wonderflex. And as you can see, I'm cutting it with an X-Acto knife, but a Dremel works a lot faster. Okay, so I don't really know how this is gonna work because in the practice piece, I put it in the oven. But my oven is not this big. So we're gonna be using a heat gun now. Stop freaking out. It's okay, it's just cosplay. So it is recommended, especially for Sintra board, to get a good even heating of it to stick it in the oven. But my oven was not this big, so I did end up using a heat gun, and it did work out very well. Like, I got it to fit my body correctly, but it took a long time to heat up the Sintra and to mold it, and my mannequin definitely came in handy because Sintra board is very hot, so please do not model it on your skin. How do bounty hunters move in this stuff? Like Boba Fett and stuff? Like, there's so much stuff going on. How could you catch and wrangle anyone with all this armor and stuff? Oh, but it looks good. Oh, trippy, isn't it? I know. It's slippery, huh? Good boy! And now for the collar. As you can see, it is an attached separate piece. So for this, I just used foam, taped it, and cut out a pattern. And for the collar, I am using a piece of craft foam sandwiched in between two pieces of Worbla. So go ahead and heat up your Worbla pieces and get yourself situated with that. And again, using a heat gun, I started heating up the pressed collar piece and just laying it over the Sintra board. I used the excess that I left around the bottom of the collar to just tuck it under the Sintra board, and it pretty much stayed pretty well. I had to super glue it a little bit just to reinforce it, but the Worbla stuck pretty well to the board. Now for added durability and strength, I added Bondo to the seam where the Worbla hit the Sintra. This is optional, but I was able to layer up the Bondo to give it a smooth curve. And if you do decide to do Bondo, you are going to be sanding. And oh my god, you're going to have to sand so much to get it to the correct shape and smoothness that you want. But to me, it was worth it to use the Bondo even though it took so much work to get it smooth. It did give me the right shape and allowed the Worbla to transfer onto the Sintra board seamlessly. And then after all of that Bondo work, I covered the whole thing in a Worbla sheet. So I wrapped the Worbla all around the collar and down the underside of the actual Sintra board just to give it a really nice thickness and overall smoothness. I did have to cover it in Worbla in two separate sections, so I did like a front section and then a section up the whole back of it. And on the seam of the shoulder I did sand it very, very smooth so it looks seamless, but if you look really hard you can tell. But it's pretty much you sand it really, really smooth so this looks like one complete solid piece. And now for the tanks that go on her back. I'm sorry I don't have any footage of me actually making them, but they're just foam covered in Worbla that I rolled into a tube, and I left the big one hollow so I can take the top off and make it into a backpack. As you can see, the details on the big tube are just made out of foam and beads, and then there's a little Worbla knob on the very far right side, and the tube connecting the two is just made from Worbla. I ended up coating the whole thing in wood glue. This smoothed out the Worbla and made all of the foam pieces and beads just stick on really, really well and make the whole thing smooth and seamless. I spray painted the entire thing black and then used a metallic paint for the aging and the details on the foam and beads. And again, make sure you use your reference photos really, really well so that you get all of the details, not only of the age marks, but of all the lettering and the colors and the placement of the aging and the rub scuff marks. And now to attach the tanks to the shoulder armor. So I first screwed the back tanks onto this really thin sheet of Sintra board, and then I screwed that whole thing onto the armor right here, which you can see. So starting on the inside of the backplate, you can see how the screws poke through in between the tanks. That's how I made them really stable and actually stay attached to the armor so they do not come off. I have to deal with them on my back the whole time. I added this fake strip of leather onto the top because it looks like that in the reference photos. Screwed that onto and I sanded off with the Dremel any extra screw bit that came through so it didn't hurt me. And then these top things are just cosmetic details to match the reference photos. Lastly, you need to add some padding to the shoulder armor because I found out the hard way that it is very hard and it rubs against your shoulder and your collarbones and hurts after all day at the convention. So I took some really thick foam, it's used for like chairs and stuff, and I just got some stretchy pleather material, hot glued that around the foam, and then hot glued the foam inside of the armor. And that was it. I just needed some paddings on the top of my shoulder to keep it from rubbing against my bony shoulders. Okay, I'm gonna apologize ahead of time because I honestly do not have a better way of making this helmet because I made it from scratch, just all out of craft foam, just piecing it together, cutting it up, hot gluing more craft foam on it, and just adding. So sorry about that, but you're just gonna have to wing it. And after I was happy with the craft foam base, I added silicone to kind of smooth out some of the rough edges and gaps. For the bottom muzzle portion of the helmet, I just cut up some pleather and hot glued it onto the helmet base. And you can see at this stage that I've already placed some portions of worbla over the craft foam top. Again, I did this in sections, so just cut up some worbla as well and start molding that over the craft foam to make it smoother. The top of the helmet was one large piece of worbla that I ended up folding over the edges. Make sure you just cut it really cleanly, keep molding it and pushing it down into the crevices of the foam that you crafted to get all the edges really smooth. I went ahead and primed all the worbla with wood glue like I did the backpacks. I spray painted the right color and aged it and added the appropriate details and everything with metallic paint. So you can see the whole helmet was actually painted brown first, and then I went over it with different variations of gray paint. The major scratches are actually Sharpie, so it's more metallic and it stands out. This was all made from craft foam and beads and attached. The details by the ears are beads, again, that I coated all in wood glue on the helmet to kind of secure them in place, and then this is a bent straw. The leather was all aged with paint, acrylic paint, and the front piece is just a piece of foam cut out and spray painted. Then the lenses are actually thin plastic coated in window tint. And then I attached a stick-on window cling, this Insta window cling, 5%, the darkest they got. Out that poster board, super glued it here and in my visor. So here is the completed Boushh costume. And if you just finished watching how I made the helmet and the chest armor and you want to figure out how I made the costume, please click over here and I will link you to how I did all the sewing and aging of the costume. Da-na-na-na. That's not even Star Wars. The helmet isn't super functional. I mean, it's comfortable if I wear it, but it is very difficult to see out of. Even though I can see out of the tinted plastic, it gets very hot in there and it fogs up with my breath. Like, it's just really hard to see out of. But it was nice when I was outside and it was like built-in sunglasses, so there is that. And for the most part, when I was wearing this at a convention, I was not wearing the helmet. I was mostly carrying it under my arm like Leia carries it when she takes it off. I did put it on for pictures, but it was just really impractical to wear the whole time I was in the costume. Last notes is I never finished putting like the writing on the back of the helmet, and I never did the strap because I ran out of this material and I can't find it anymore, and I can't redo the whole thing unless I use different kind of leather, and I decided it would look worse, so I just left off the strap, but it does need a strap. Another thing which is great about costumes like this is that they are aged and battle damaged, so if my worbla does start chipping, it just makes it look better. So this is just a piece of leather. I super glued Velcro onto one side so it would kind of keep it shut. And then the other side I've just super glued onto the armor.
And then this is just glued onto the leather bands, which is kind of hanging there. Okay, that about wraps up this costume tutorial. I hope you like it and give this video a big thumbs up. And if you have any comments, concerns, or questions, please feel free to ask them in the comments below or go ahead and message me directly. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and got to spend a little time with me as we're costuming. So, I will see you next Wednesday. Bye. I'm a turtle, man. I did it! Woo!